I want to. Oh, she was sleeping. I woke her up. She was in her nap. Okay, here we are. It is the happy hour at the Spiritual Neighborhood, and we have a new guest today, and we are live on Facebook if you're watching this right now, but you can see it on our YouTube channels and TikTok later on. And our sponsor is Miles Smiles Entertainment and Events. I'm Deborah Colleen Rose. We have Lou Ann Morris, and we have Matthew Pierce, and Lou Ann's going to introduce our guest today.
Yes, we are thrilled to introduce to you Kerrin Kuntzman. I said that right. Kuntzman,
Kuntzman, right?
Kuntzman. And she is a Dallas-based sound healing practitioner who has helped us countless clients find clarity and rediscover their zest for life. I need that. Through her work with innovative tools like the harmonic egg and her expertise in energy healing, such as the emotion code, body code, and belief code, Kerrin empowers individuals to relax, release emotional traumas, and achieve improved well-being. We welcome you, Kerrin, and we're glad you're here to talk to us today.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I am happy to be here.
The egg is cool. I'm just got to say that before we get started. I don't know which one you want to start talking about first.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got to tell you, the egg is cool. I've seen the egg. I sat in the egg. The egg is cool.
Next is an actual session, and then you really would be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, you may never see
Okay, so you all have experienced this. I have not. So what is this egg? What is it?
It's
So
fried.
it is a sound and light resonant chamber in the shape of an egg. It's substantial. It's 11 foot point to point, 7 foot in height, 7 foot in depth. So it basically, when I leased my office, I actually had to expand the walls out to even be able to accommodate it. And then they built the egg inside. I'm on the 5th floor. So they had to bring it up in segments and build it inside the building. And I often joke with people because it has a sliding door. And so when you are inside, it is very immersive. And very, very rarely, but every now and again, I get someone who feels a little claustrophobic. And I like to joke with them about it and say, look, if you can be inside a closed bathroom door with the door closed, then you can be inside the egg.
Right.
I also have some techniques from some of my experience with Hawaiian healing where I can literally lift off phobias. So if somebody really needs some help with that, there's a little trick that I can do that will actually help them with that. But in general, people have no issues. The egg is really calming.
So is it do you go in and lay down? Do you go in and sit? I mean,
You sit.
what kind of, okay, you sit. So
There's a zero
you enter
gravity
from the
chair.
front?
Yep.
Oh,
The
okay.
doorway pulls out, it slides out, kind of like a cabinet on tracks, pulls out. And then you go in and sit in this wonderful zero gravity chair. And then I adjust the person to whatever position feels most comfortable. They can be in absolute peace, relaxation. And then at that point, based on whatever it is they're trying to achieve, I select the music and the colors. And there is a certain amount of science to this because we know that on the first session, we always want to take the person out of fight or flight into rest and digest. Now, so we're working on the autonomic nervous system, getting you into from the sympathetic into the parasympathetic mode. Now, that may not be accomplished with just one session if people are really, really experiencing trauma or PTS, whatever PTSD, whatever you want to, whatever traumas they might have gone through, but it's really going to make great headway. And there's a lot of science to the colors that are used. So there are specific calming colors I might use. There may be higher energy colors if I'm trying to achieve something like helping people feel a little bit better in their joints. That's an example where we might use different brighter colors for that. But as we start off, we're using the calming, the soothing, the blues, the purples, the aquas, greens, all those wonderful colors.
It's always been funny to me when people talk about like seeing auras. Some people can see auras, some can't. And I always tell them, don't worry about seeing someone's auras. Worry about having the colors around you because colors affect us so much. It's like, Denny's for years were yellow and orange because they wanted you to feel happy when you walked in, eat fast and get the hell out of there.
Heck out of there, yeah.
And after a while, those colors agitate you enough that you want to leave.
Exactly.
And
yeah, there's been so much science done on that.
Right. And they started painting prisons different colors, trying to keep the inmates calmer, things of that nature. So,
Oh, is that why it's always gray?
yeah.
And from what I've heard, pink will actually make somebody physically weaker. So that was one of the things too, that if you don't want people to be super strong in an environment where you can be overcome, pink will also tone that down. At least when I had read a few years ago, that was one of the facts with pink. But there's an awful lot that goes into that. So the behind the scenes work I'm doing with the knowledge I've garnered over a number of years, I was actually an early adopter to this modality. So I was the 10th owner of a harmonic egg in the US. So I've
Wow.
had almost 7 years of practice with this. It'll be 7 years come September. And it's really fun. It's just a marvelous device. It's a marvelous creation.
So, how did you find out about this?
Well, I actually had a health crisis. And so I was frantically looking for solutions because I knew I just did not feel well and the problems were not resolving. And so I actually found a website that featured a talk between Regina Meredith. Some of you may know her of Gaia fame, and Gail Lynn. And this was actually on Regina Meredith's website. I later, Regina Meredith and Gail Lynn did actually a publication on Gaia itself, so that you can go back and find that if you want to look at the evergreen content that they have on Open Minds on Gaia. There is one featuring talking about the harmonic egg, but the one that I actually watched was on Regina's website. And the moment I watched it, I really had an intuitive knowing that I had to have this, that I absolutely had to have this, which was kind of remarkable. It's not small, it's not inexpensive, but I just knew that this was what I needed for healing. And I remember at the time I was working, I was the office manager for a chiropractic clinic. It was an integrated medical clinic. And I remember telling a dear friend of mine who is a retired chiropractor, the chiropractor there at the time, I said, I'm going to buy this. And he said, well, are you going to go up and see it? I said, nope, I'm going. And he thought I was absolutely crazy, but I knew that I was having some heart rhythm issues, and I knew that it simply would not work for me, that I could not travel at that point. And so I did. I bought the egg sight unseen, and I have not regretted it for 1 minute.
Yeah, it
How,
makes sense. Go ahead, Luann.
how is the harmonic egg different than, say, a sound bath or something of that nature?
Well, I think they have similar components. Um, um, this is very, very immersive. So it's almost as if you're in a chamber. So it's like an isolation chamber. But again, not scary and not being filled up with water. I know I've had people compare it to a flotation tank. Here's why I think, in my opinion, I prefer this because water holds energy. And
Mhm.
so I don't necessarily know, and somebody would have to educate me on this. I don't know if they change water every time between every client. I would imagine that probably wouldn't happen because of the volume of water you'd have to have in those tanks, but I may be wrong. But the nice thing about this is that this is created with sacred geometry and numerology. So we don't have any energy holding on there. Again, as the energy practitioner, I'm holding space for the client when they're in the egg. And it's just a very, very different experience. A lot of people can actually feel the energy that I feel is generated from the egg when they walk into the facility. I have a small little facility. It's a couple of small rooms. But when people come in, they often tell me it feels really calm. And I do attribute a lot of that to the egg. I think it generates a field. And there's been some research done into this, and the thought process is there is scalar energy being generated as the sound and the light is created, and combine that with the sacred geometry and the numerology. And I think this is why people have such wonderful experiences.
I'd like
Hmm.
to say something about the flotation tank. I think that you're right on about what you're saying with it. I do know that they don't change the water in the flotation tanks, but because
Well, I'm going to say that I have gone to them, and actually the place where I went, they do.
okay, well, they didn't use to in some of the,
Yeah.
but they use sea salt, which I think makes a difference.
Mhm.
But I know I went to one of the first flotation tank facilities here way, way, way back. I'm not going to tell you when because I'm so old. Uh, but I was suffering from exhaustion and grief. My husband had just died. And I was
Mhm.
getting by on about 4 hours of sleep, and I was drinking way too much, okay, because I didn't know how to manage grief at the age of 25. And I would get into that flotation tank, and 1 hour in that tank was the equivalent of 8 hours sleep. And that's the only thing
Mhm.
I think that saved my body through that process.
Mhm.
But now, with that experience in my memory bank, I go and sit. I don't do a session. I just sit in this egg. I am so high after 5 minutes in that egg because the energy is so profound and so soothing and so encompassing. I can imagine, I can just imagine what it does for people,
Well,
especially.
what's interesting about this is that I get a wide range of experience comments on this. And I've noticed that I do find that if people are meditators, they do tend to experience more. Or if they themselves know that they're very sensitive to energy, there is a different experience. If someone's coming in and hasn't had a lot of experience with perhaps, um, the study of metaphysics or kind of getting into this alternative healing type of modalities, energy work, they haven't meditated. Sometimes someone will come out and just say, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I feel relaxed." And I'm thinking, okay. And then other people will come out and say, "Oh my gosh, I don't know where I went, but it was so different. And I had these visions and, uh, it took me a while to come back into my body." It goes from the gamut. I've had people tell me, and I hate to kind of set up, so if I'm telling you some of the more extreme things, I don't want people coming in and thinking that's an every time sort of situation. Every session is quite different one to another, and I've been able to see that myself. And the longer that I work with the egg, the less dramatic some of my sessions are. Every now and again, I'll have something that's totally off the charts. But a lot of the day to day, I go in and I sleep. Now, I think that's because I'm chronically under, I just don't get enough sleep. So I think that's part of the issue with me. But I have had people that have felt that they have been touched. I had someone who went in and had a rather profound experience of a recently dead rock star drummer coming and visiting,
Wow.
literally touching him. That was one of my more dramatic, and this was kind of an unusual experience for him. He was rather surprised by it, as you can imagine. I've had people see what they consider to be angels. It's very common for people, the more common experience is that people will feel vibration, tingling. Sometimes, if one has an ailment that needs a little extra work, they might feel that area pinging or a little pain temporarily in that area. I've had that happen one time where I went in and my sinuses, I really needed some help with my sinuses. And in this session, this was rather dramatic. I actually felt like I was getting a cranial sacral adjustment. I felt a great deal of movement and touching around my head. Now, again, that's pretty rare. I've had the egg for many times, and I mean, I've had it for, 7 years, whatever it is. But that was the first time I'd had something that extreme in terms of physical pressure. So, but it runs the gamut. It really does.
And how do you decide to treat what someone has? Do you follow a program?
Yes, we have a number of different session guidelines that we can follow. We also have both instruction on color and light. What I have found and what I might do a little bit differently because I do an awful lot of energetic muscle testing in the other work that I do with clients. I Once I determine what I believe would be the right session for them, what would be the right music and light, then I will also do energetic muscle testing where I'm connecting in with them and asking their body, is this the highest and best for you today? And I will get a yes or a no. And sometimes I'm surprised. Usually I'm on point. Usually intuitively I have an idea, but sometimes I'm totally surprised. It says nope. And I'm thinking, really? Okay, let me try it again. And I have found that makes a big difference between people having a session that may not resonate with them quite as much as it otherwise might.
What they come to
Karen,
me
I
and
have
say, go ahead,
I'm sorry.
Matthew.
I was just because you keep on saying music. Um, for me, the experience like of having music playing, that would completely just not be like something that I would enjoy. I'm more to the point of like, do you like do like solfeggio tones or binaural beats or something of that nature that like kind of align with frequencies?
Not as much as you would think. This is really more suites of music. A lot of them are made by sound healers. Some of them are custom designed for the egg. I think you might be pleasantly surprised if you were to go into the egg. I don't think you would be distracted in the way that you would think. I've never had anyone come out and say, "Oh, that music was distract." Now, that being said, I've got to say that if I were to put you in on drumming on your first session, that's not where we'd want to be on the first session. But just knowing what we use for our general relaxation sessions, the what we're trying to do to acclimate you and to bring that autonomic nervous system, on board, get it balanced and so on. I think you'd be pleasantly surprised. I
So
really
we're not
do.
going to get in there and you're going to play ABBA because I'd come out of there screaming.
No, no,
No.
no.
Oh.
Again, there are some custom made things and then other musics that are created by sound healers and so on.
That's kind of a running joke with our show because everybody knows how much I hate ABBA.
Oh, do you? Ah.
I know I'm in the
So
minority.
with the sounds though, I mean, are they specifically created for the egg? I mean,
The
like
musical
like
suites are created for the
yeah,
egg. So, like,
okay.
you know, there may be a piece that is um, stressless, let's say. So we've got something where we're really working to bring down. And so instead of thinking it as tones, think of it as instruments, because there are certain instruments that are really beneficial for certain conditions. So if we want to work on the heart, or the physically the heart or emotionally the heart, we may use things like the harp, or we may use things like the guitar. So there are instruments that are very helpful. Um, Piano is interesting because a lot of folks that really whose nervous systems are really, really out of kilter can't tolerate piano very well initially. And then as they get better, they can align with the piano music. I was one of those people. Now, when I first got the egg, my body was so off kilter and needed so much gentle healing work that I really couldn't tolerate a full session. I started off with lights only in the egg, and then I gradually gave myself small amounts of energy until I could tolerate a full session. So it is actually more powerful than one would recognize. Yeah. But again, different instruments can be valuable for different circumstances. So again, I think if we found the right one for you or what you were trying to attain, it's very much in alignment with the instruments and how the body responds. We also use nature sounds. Nature sounds are wonderful for um, stress, trauma. So we have some pieces, like we have one called Kids Sanctuary. It's amazing because it has a lot of nature sounds in it. A lot of people resonate with that. We have some things that have water sounds in it. And of course, that is very, very harmonizing and very calming.
That's really interesting to me. Previously, years ago, I have a nonprofit that works with mental health issues, the Council of Families, and we had a program called the Listening Program. And we used this for helping children with ADHD and different things. And there were different sequences, and you had to plug in all this information to know what sequences to use. And they incorporated all those instruments, nature sounds, water sounds, and you had to do them in a certain type of rotation depending on what you're treating. So it's amazing how we know how important sound is, but we so badly incorporate it,
Yeah.
into our daily lives. That's what gets me.
Can you imagine if we put a rap piece into this?
Oh,
I mean, can you imagine the discordant, uh, it would be rather abrasive to one system. So the music is very carefully chosen.
now if we're getting ready to go to war, we might want to play rap for everybody.
Exactly. Exactly.
Let's go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask you to do something special for us. You were talking about the emotion code, the belief code, and the body code. Now, we throw those words around like taffy. you know. But I bet there's a lot of people that don't really know what that entails and the differences. Could you explain a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. So these techniques were developed by Dr. Bradley Nelson, who is a retired chiropractor. He was in practice for 17 years. And it's rather interesting because when he was doing his adjustments on people, he found that he could do the same adjustment on person A and on person B, and person A it would hold, person B it would not consistently. And he was trying to understand why would that be? I'm doing exactly the same thing. And he came up with this concept. I think he was one of the early pioneers of the concept of trapped emotions. And and that there was something well beyond the obvious that was working in the behind the scenes that was actually keeping people from healing. So the concept here with these is that we really have trapped traumas and trapped emotions. Now, the most familiar to people is the emotion code. Dr. Bradley Nelson's had that book out for quite a long time. That's a book that I urge people to check out. They can work on themselves using that book, and all they have to do is do a form of muscle testing. The easiest of which for people to do is called the sway test. So that's something you can look online, look for a demonstration of the sway test, and you can look for trapped emotions in the body and clear them. That's pretty simple. It's effective, but it is fairly basic. It's just looking for trapped emotions. And then some years later, he introduced the body code. Now, with the body code, what we're using is a desktop app that has about 1,000, if you were looking at an analog form, it has about 1,000 pages of data. And then we use energetic muscle testing. Personally, and I don't know if you can see this, but I use the ring and ring method of muscle testing, energetic muscle testing. So if I'm asking for a yes answer, I'll get a strong response. And if I'm looking for a no, I get a very weak response. And I set the intention to connect with the individual, which can be for a lot of people pretty hard to believe that I can just sit here, set my intention to connect with you, Deborah, and connect. But it actually is fairly simple to do when you're experienced and you have a lot of practice in it. And then based on that, I use the desktop app and the muscle testing to decode different imbalances in the body. Now, just like you would if you wanted to root out a problem in your garden, if you want to get rid of a dandelion, you can't just pluck the head off. You've got to look for the roots. So this is what we do when we're working with the body code. So I would ask, is there an imbalance I can decode? And I would come up with either a yes or a no. I think I've only had it say no once, and that is because generally the person is not ready for a session at that time for whatever reason it is. One does need to be very hydrated for this to work well because I think it's probably the electrical connection between us. But so we want to get to the roots. So then I look for associated imbalances, and it kind of flows like a flow chart, kind of going down, down, down. And I'm asking for all the imbalances. And usually about halfway through the session, it switches from the body to the energetic emotion things that we need to clear. And in Dr. Nelson's techniques, there are things like trapped emotions, but there can also be things like something that's called a broadcast message. And a broadcast message is when we're holding a specific frequency in the form of a statement in our body, and it's radiating out unbeknownst to us. We never would want to radiate the type of messages that we sometimes encounter. Sometimes we have a belief that's stuck in the body that we need to get rid of as well. So it's these different sorts of things that we start looking at. And then when we no longer have anything that the subconscious mind, because I'm tapping into the person's subconscious just by asking the yes, no questions, when we no longer have anything like that remaining, then I use the third part of this and I begin to clear that. And I'm using the the energy, the bioelectromagnetic energy from my hand, and I take my hand and I rub it over the governing meridian, which is the same thing that you do with emotion code. Now, I am just going to tell people, if anybody's read the book, Dr. Nelson talks about using a magnet. I will say that a magnet is not necessary. I've had people come in and say, well, you're not using a magnet. Well, when you go through training, you understand a magnet's not necessary. I'm a Reiki master. I use the energy from my hand all the time. So it is not necessary to use a magnet. Just working with your hand is enough. I think the magnet for beginners gives them the confidence that they're clearing. If that does that make sense to you guys? You know what I mean?
It's kind of like the wand for Harry Potter. Does he really have magic, or is it the wand? You know?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so then we go back and we clear this. And usually by the end of the session, someone can feel a major shift. It may be that they feel lighter. Quite often, if we're working on a problem, let's say for someone, they might come in with a stiff neck. I usually ask them to rate that at the beginning of the session. Is it a 5 out of a 10 on a scale of 10? And then by the end of the session, it's down to a 2. Now, I can't state across the board that that's always the case, but more often than not, it is. There's some sort of physical change that accompanies that, and some sort of emotional change. The So that's the body code. Now, the belief code is his latest modality. And if you look at the body code, it works what we consider, like if we use the analogy of the brain as a computer, the body and brain as a computer. So it works on the software system. Now, on the belief code, it's working on the hardware, the operating, the mechanical. And so we're looking for an unwanted belief system, a negative belief system that exists. And this can be very handy when we've got a tendency to enter the same sorts of relationships in life. We're always finding ourselves behind the 8 ball in terms of finances. We always attract the same kind of friends, same the attitudes, whatever it may be. We might find ourselves in a situation where every job is unappealing to us, and that I kind of had this happen to myself. This was before the belief code, but I found that I always was in a job where I was bullied, and
Oh
I realized,
no.
yeah, I had multiple jobs. I was in a very male-dominated field. I sold steel, so it was a tough market for females, but I found it really, really difficult. And at some point, this is not related to either of these modalities, but I realized that the one thing that was consistent through all this is that I was taking myself with me. So it didn't matter what job, I was still having the same problem. This would be an ideal set of circumstances to use the belief code, because we've got to figure out what is the belief that's causing you to continue to attract bullying employers into your life, because ultimately, it rests here. So that's the sort of thing where you would use a belief code. Now, again, with the belief code, now we've got about 2,000 pages or 2,000 different beliefs that we can sort through and filter through and identify, and then be able to clear. There's also some associated imbalances where we revert back to the body code to also clear those, because we're always looking for the roots. And then when we clear a belief system, it's very powerful, and it will continue to work on you for about the next 2 months. And it's really, they're both magnificent modalities.
So I have experienced this. I'm lucky enough in my life, I attract friends that do all different kinds of things, and they like me to be their guinea pig. So I've gotten to experience both of these. Have either of you gone through any of this at all?
No, but I would love to do the belief system.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's pretty
it's
powerful.
powerful. It's very powerful. So,
I would love to do it too. But what comes into my head, and of course this comes from my background. What's you come up with like a protocol to go through, and then like you say that it stays with you for like 2 to 3 months. What's kind of the how do you establish like the ongoing, you know?
How do we know that it's 2 or 3 months? Well,
Yeah.
I'm able
Well, I
to
mean, but even
experience.
after the 2 or 3 months, if I came in with a problem and now something shifted, how do you go about and say, okay, well, that shifted. Now we need to look at this.
Well, a lot of
What's
that
that
I
next
do
step?
intuitively and through muscle testing. And a lot of
Gotcha.
times the people will tell me themselves, okay, I can feel the difference. Can we analytically say number one, number two, number three, number four change? No, of course not. This is not. So a lot of times what I'll tell people is try to let the analytical mind go while you're doing the
Cool.
session, because it just doesn't fit that model. Dr. Nelson likes to say in the body code that anything can cause anything. So let's say, for example, that I'm working on, I'll use an example he had, but I'm working on someone's chronic headaches and a body imbalance that seems absolutely unrelated, like their elbow comes up. You might think, what the heck does this have to do with anything? I've learned not to question. I simply look for the imbalance, look for all the associated imbalance, and then go backwards and clear. And not too long ago, I had a wonderful woman come in and she was clearly very disbelieving, hands across the chest. All the body language was telling me, yeah, I don't believe you. And at one point in time, she said, and I think the very first thing that came up for her in one session was the energy of a over-the-counter medicine, and it turned out to be a cold medicine. So the very first thing that came up that was that apparently seemed to be unrelated to this problem was the energy of a cold medicine. And I knew as I looked at this, she is not going to like this. This is going to be a little far out for her. And so when I told her, she said, I really don't understand what this has to do with anything. I said, I get it. And I said, but I'm pretty upfront with people. I said, look, I'd like to ask you something. As hard as it is, I'd like you simply to throw out the analytical mind as much as you can. Try to be open to it, because it also makes it much harder on me when I've got someone sitting opposite me like this. I'm very consciously aware of how distrusting they are of the process. And I told her that. And I said, if we can just set that aside, let's see what we can do. I said, I've learned not to question or judge the results. I don't filter them either. So I could have very easily said, she's not going to like this. I'm going to throw this one out. We're just going to go for something else. But I would not be trusting the process or giving her the best possible session that I could, which is simply running the session the way that I should run the session. Does that kind of make sense? I
Oh,
know that.
That
absolutely.
makes total sense.
I think all of us can relate to this concept of that. First of all, why was she in her chair in your office if if there wasn't something that she was not trusting in her own self? And so, with some of the things that I do, people go, well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, just read it and think about it, because I do handwriting profiles as part of the handwriting therapy. I'll use that as an example. I've only had one person in my entire career say my profile was wrong. And
I've had your services. It's very good.
and I
Very
just
good.
thank you. And I just told her, I said, well, here's the thing. I'm human. I'm allowed to be wrong, but I will tell you up to this point, I never have been. So why don't you take that and go read it and ponder it? Okay. And then tomorrow, call me and we'll discuss it and we'll see where you're at that point. Well, she called me the next day and she apologized. She goes, I'm just lying to myself. And I thought, you know what? That is the truest statement I have ever heard in my life. So many people, when they come to us, they want to be distrusting of us, but it's themselves that they don't trust because they know they lied to themselves. And
Well, I will tell you with the particular client that I'm citing, she actually went on to have 6 or 7 sessions with me.
there you go.
She immediately
Yeah.
scheduled another appointment. She felt part of hers was physical pain, and she immediately felt about a 50% decrease in the physical pain at the end of
Wow.
the session.
That's
Now, I
awesome.
will tell you that physical pain can be difficult because sometimes what I notice is it depends on the length of the problem. It can take longer when we've had something anchored in for quite a long time. There's more trauma. I like to think of this, and I don't know, this is an analogy that works for me with this modality, is I feel that we all come in with an empty bucket, right? And as we start having experiences, life experiences, whether that's a death or a loss or a heartbreak, we're dumping something into that bucket. Or when we have that fight with the friend or the neighbor, we're dumping more into the bucket. And somewhere for a lot of people, and often it's a little bit later, I'd say around the age 40. But whenever that bucket, because it could be younger for someone who has a lot more trauma, that bucket begins to overflow, now we start having the things like the overwhelming anxiety, the depression, the physical ailments that start popping up, So what I see is my whole goal is to take some things out of that bucket. When we get enough out of that bucket, the body then is able to innately heal. The body heals. It's nothing that I'm doing. It's that we get some of that trauma and that junk out, and then the body doesn't have to spend so much of its energy suppressing the trapped emotions and the trauma. Now it can focus on the body and aligning the body toward wellness.
See,
That's how I.
I love that. I think that's a great analogy for this. And the other thing I like to just remind people, if someone's watching us right now, is that it's just like doctors. You can have three doctors that are cardiologists, and maybe one doctor is a good fit for you and the other two aren't because matching energy, matching belief system.
Absolutely.
Maybe one doctor's just not good at what they do, you know? Uh,
Absolutely.
that type of thing. And so I always get frustrated when I'm talking to people, because I meet a lot of resistance in the world because I talk to everybody. So my percentages go up higher, is that they say, oh, yeah, Reiki, blah, 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 or that, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't work. Well, why? Well, I had a session, one whole session. Who was,
Right.
what did they do? And did you follow the directions? And were you open? That's the key. Were you open and were you willing to receive? It's just like if the doctor
Absolutely.
gives you a prescription and you don't take the pills, it's not going to work, you
And
know?
you can kind of, on my end, you can feel it like a wall.
Oh,
Mhm.
And
yeah.
this is one thing also where I feel that if I sense this and if they sense this and they tell me I've tried this stuff before, it never works, this is where the belief code can come in. And we need to see, why do you feel like it can work for everybody else but not you? So that's telling me we've got a belief system in place there, because of course it can work for you if it's worked for other people. So we need to also address belief systems at times. So there are times where when we're working on a physical problem that we might need to go back in and also work on a belief system around that physical problem. Why is it that you have psoriatic arthritis? Why is it that you have chronic depression? And why do you feel like we can't overcome it? And so sometimes that can be helpful. It's like going, doing a 360 around the problem and looking at multiple angles to figure out what we can do. But as far as what you were saying with different practitioners, absolutely no question. I think both the egg and these modalities have a lot to do with practitioner, whether or not you feel like it's a good fit for you, whether I'm a good fit for the person, or if I'm not, I would encourage them to seek someone else out because um, I've gotten plenty of people from other practitioners, and I'm sure other people have gotten, people from me as well. I don't know about those. I don't hear about those, but it just makes logical sense. There are going to be people that find that I'm a good fit and people that don't.
Yeah, it just makes sense. And, I always tell people when you're hiring someone to work with you, whatever capacity, make sure they're a good fit. And remember, you're the one in charge, even if it's a doctor, and you get to fire the doctor. And I always tell people, of course, this is my private investigation background. I always take it with me everywhere. Check their credentials, check their training. When I hire doctors, I'm like, where were you in your graduating class? Were you in the upper 50 or the lower 50?
That's
I want to I want to hedge my bet a little bit. I want to at least start it with the upper level,
yeah,
not
right.
the lower level,
And
So,
I would just encourage, people, hey, do it, but be kind and be polite. You know,
yes, you don't have to be rude,
you don't have to be
I
rude.
think
Just, recognize that the other person on the other end of the phone, if you're calling to talk with them about what you want to do, just recognize that they're a person too, and they have feelings. And, I have plenty of people that call and want to get a 15-minute consultation to find out if this might work for them, if they've got a situation. And I'm happy to offer those. Um, I usually try to limit them to about 15 minutes, but I try to answer people's questions as honestly as I can.
well, go ahead,
Aaron,
Luann. I see you
I'm
pop.
sorry.
Go ahead, Luann.
Matthew has a question.
Oh, go ahead. Somebody was talking.
Actually, it's not really a question because I'm just gonna, Karen, the way I'm feeling right now is like I'm almost on the verge of tears. Like I'm hearing this, and in my analytical mind, I'm thinking, why the hell is this happening? Why is this coming up? But then you were talking about the physical, but then also that there's the emotional beliefs, behind it that could be causing a lot of the physical. And I actually feel that there's like something really there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
So um, I'm sure
I have
you
a box
have
of
people that
Kleenex in
get this
my
all the time.
office. This happens all the time. That's no
Okay.
joke. I mean, I try to treat it lightly, but I recognize for people it's a very powerful emotion. I don't want them to feel uncomfortable when they come into the office and they begin to cry. And I would say it is a very frequent response. People are coming in with things that if they've been carrying with them for decades that are very powerful. And frequently we have a lot obviously around deaths and pathings, but we also have a lot around loves that have gone wrong, relationships that just haven't ended in the way that we would have liked them to, or or continued in the way that we would have liked them to. And I find very often that within marriages that we do have to go in and do a lot of clearing around those that have been very traumatic, so that that person isn't now going forward and carrying either those same patterns into another relationship or carrying the energy that now results in something physical, like a cancer or like whatever it may be. Again, one of the more common ones that I believe this is how it's working, is that often we'll begin to see anxiety and depression is in the initial stages. And of course, when they talk about depression, in the metaphysical world, we often talk about it being anger turned inward. So that's just an indication that we've got to clear some of that anger so that we can get some of that anxiety and the depression cleared up.
The best cure for anger I have found is say, I am really pissed at you. It works wonders
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. But a lot of people just don't feel comfortable. Someone proposed something to me the other day, and I thought it was very interesting. We do work with the energy centers, the chakras in this in the body code modality, and one of the things that will come up often for women is the throat chakra. And she suggested that very often, we as women have been taught, especially of a certain generation, to hold our tongues and to be very gentle in the way we approach people, and that, we are not able to communicate maybe as forcefully, most of us, as we might sometimes want to. And someone proposed to me the other day, and I think it makes an awful lot of sense, that this might be why women have so many thyroid issues.
Makes sense.
It
It
makes
does
a
make
lot of
sense.
sense. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank goodness I didn't learn that lesson.
And that's a real blessing and an asset.
Well,
Right.
it gets me in trouble though. There are other troubles that come with it. There's always a dark side to everything that has an upside. So, all right. So you do those things, and then you also have energy jewelry. Is that right?
I do. I do. Frequency infused jewelry.
Okay.
It's infused with the Earth's energy, the Schumann resonance, which I know a lot of our listeners will probably be familiar with. And it's infused with the frequency of 7.83 hertz. It is permanently infused so that once you buy the piece, it is not going to lose the frequency. Even if you're sitting in front of a computer screen all day, if you've got EMFs that you've got a lot of exposure to. So, 5 years from now, you're still going to have the frequency in that piece of jewelry. So it's a permanent purchase, if you want to think of that.
So
Yes.
how does that work? How do you infuse it?
Well, that's a proprietary technique, but I do use a lab
Okay.
that's been doing this for years and years, and they've done extensive study on the frequencies. And I created this line because there are other people out there that do frequency jewelry. Some of them hold, some of them don't. I will tell you, there was a fairly well-known manufacturer of frequency watches, and a woman came into my facility and she had on this. By the way, they're quite expensive. My jewelry is fairly moderate. She came in wearing this beautiful watch. She said, my dad just bought it for me. And I said, it's gorgeous. And so I showed her what I offered. And I said, do you want to muscle test your watch? Do you want to, not muscle test, actually, we're literally testing the physical stability that one has when they wear an item. With the jewelry that I produce, there is a physical stability test that we can do in office, or that I can even describe to people to do. And by pressing down, we can see if that piece of jewelry makes one physically more stable. So there's lots of things that the Schumann frequency does, but one of them is physical stability and strength. There are other things like calmness and focus, and it can help with anxiety potentially. The one that I can demonstrate, though, is the physical stability and strength. And so she took off of her jewelry that she was wearing, and we tried the ring or whatever it was. I usually use a ring and have them hold it or put it on and then do it again. And people are just strong as a rock, strong as a rock. And then we put back on, I said, well, let's get rid of this. Now you know what strength should feel like. Do you want to try the watch? She had a watch and something else, a bracelet or something. She said, sure. So one by one, we tried them, weak as a kitten. Did not
Wow.
add to her physical strength. And I believe that that watch was about 300 or 350. And with my jewelry, I try to make this very affordable with items as low as $49. Actually, I have some beautiful 8mm 8 millimeter, what am I trying to say, stone bracelets that are just as inexpensive as $38.95. So I try to make this affordable for any budget where people, if they want to, they can have a beautiful piece of jewelry. And the other thing that I have tried to do is make this jewelry truly beautiful and not look like a relic from the 90s. We want to bring it into contemporary, where if you want a paperclip bracelet, I have paperclip bracelets. Do you want a beautiful metaphysical symbol of a moon or um, a dragonfly? I have very small, delicate pieces that can be layered, or I have more dramatic statement pieces. It's just depending on what the person likes. But I've tried to make these pieces of jewelry very, very current, so that we're not wearing funky looking stuff that's outdated.
So what is
So
Kerrin's
you
going
have
to
them
come
in
back
line,
and
right?
show.
what's
Kerrin's going
that?
to come back and show her jewelry
Yeah.
June the 6th. June the 6th?
And so what
Help
does
me.
this jewelry do for people when they wear it? What can they expect?
Well, the physical stability is huge. So for those of us that are not 20 and we've lost some of our core strength, one of the things that I really like to tell people is that if you're like us, where we're over a certain age, or if you've got a grandmother or a parent that's aging, if you get them something that they can wear 24/7, it will literally enhance their physical stability and make them less likely to trip and fall. Now,
Wow.
that's quite a claim. And so, I'm throwing a disclaimer that statement has not been evaluated by the FDA. You would just have to experience this for yourself. I have a 90-day warranty on any piece of jewelry, so it's a very safe purchase. If you don't like it, if it doesn't do what you think it should do, you simply send it back. Now, people who are very sensitive to it can sometimes feel it, but I think the more, how do I want to say it? Not everybody can feel jewelry. Not everybody's so sensitive they can feel the frequency. So really, doing the strength test shows people what it does. So I had
Mhm.
an occasion the other day where I had somebody working on my pipes in the front yard. They were working on the irrigation system. So I wanted to get down to look at those pipes, but I'm older and I'm plump, and I got down and I had a hard time getting up. And when I did, they had mounded the dirt, and I put my foot on this mound of dirt and I started to lose my balance. I have multiple pieces of jewelry on. You probably can see the different
Oh,
things that
those are pretty. Hold on,
yeah, this is paper clip.
pretty.
Pendant that I have is a beautiful, means a lot to me. It's Saint Francis, and I love animals, and I love the prayer of Saint Francis, so I have that. This is a fun thing. It's a mood ring, just for the fun of it.
I love
So you
those
can
rings.
see I'm calm, reasonably calm here. Anyway, so when I tried to get my, gain purchase on the ground, I couldn't. And I was my arms were, I was windmilling, I guess would be the term. And I thought, I'm going to face plant in my front yard. And amazingly, I did not. And I am confident that without this jewelry, I would have fallen because I just didn't have the balance that I needed after I hit that patch of ground that was uneven. So I feel that that was one occasion where I didn't take a fall, that I would have been more likely to take a fall. The other stuff is more anecdotal, where I've had people who've had some issues with anxiety say absolutely they will not be. I have two men that have told me this. And for a guy to say this, got to be pretty dramatic, because usually you're not going to hear those kinds of comments from the men quite as much about anxiety and so on. But I have a couple of younger men who said, I won't not wear my bracelet. These guys are wearing a silicone bracelet, something pretty basic.
Right.
But they love it. They said it made a big difference to the anxiety levels.
I got a question. Would you be open to us coming to your office and
Yeah,
letting each one of us sit in the pod for about 5 minutes and videotaping
absolutely.
our what I can't think of the word I want. Our reaction.
Absolutely. Yeah. Probably want more than 5 minutes, but 10 or 15 minutes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. And you're coming back, Luann, she's coming back June
June the 9th.
9th.
June the 9th.
And you're going to show us the jewelry. I need jewelry. I never have enough jewelry. And I got a gift card as a tip the other night so I can spend it. So
Well, when you're at the office, you'll see all the jewelry. I have more of the jewelry on the office. I also have a website that is separate from my harmoniceggdallas.com website. Do you mind if I just mention
no,
that?
no, that's part of the show. We expect you to tell people how to find you. So
So zenwavecreations.com is the jewelry website. And I also have jewelry on the website at harmoniceggdallas.com. And that's where you can check out the different service options that I have for the body code, the belief code. I also have the emotion code down, but I would highly recommend, it's the same price. I would just recommend going up to that, the next level, which is the body
Sure.
code. You get a
Sure.
lot more. And then I also have pieces of jewelry on the website.
Okay, so here's the
Nice.
problem with our show. We have a problem. Okay, it's not really a problem. We get such fascinating people on here. I want to talk for hours. And I have made a commitment so I don't have to edit the video that we keep it under an hour so it can go on TikTok. So we're going to shut this down now. We want you back. You're coming back. But I want us to come to your facility because I'm selfish and I want to experience this a little bit. And I also want to be able to show people what we're talking about because that'll help you as well. And we're all about supporting the healing modalities in our community, and especially the ones that we believe in. And I really think there's a lot of benefit here. And I've always enjoyed your company. So
Thank you. I've enjoyed yours as well.
well, thank you. We're just having a love fest.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, I appreciate you coming on, and this will be up tomorrow because I'm working tonight. So we'll have all the links. Any more questions, guys? Quick question.
1,000 questions, but I'll write some of them down for next time.
Yeah, we'll do it next time because you can come back as much as you want,
Thank you.
I mean, seriously, when you're talking about healing, you can't cover anything in 45, 50 minutes. Seriously.
No.
And that's why they call it practicing medicine because we're always expanding, we're always growing, we're always doing more. So, all right, guys.
Absolutely. And Luann, if you want to reach out to me, we
Okay,
can set up a day to get you all to experience the
I
egg.
will. Thank you.
Sound
That's
good?
what we're doing Wednesday. We're going to the other Karen's house, and she's going to do crystal bed healing on us. And
That's
we're
wonderful.
going to take that for next week. So that's going to be fun.
That will be fun.
Nice.
So, all right, Dr. Pierce, tell them how to find you.
You can get a hold of me at matthewapierce.com or my website, matthewapierce.com. And just have all kinds of stuff up there. So
There you go.
And Pierce is Pierce, right?
that is correct.
All right, Luann.
Well, ancientherbalapothecary.com or email me. That's the best way to talk to me. Luann at ancientherbalapothecary.com.
And I want to say thank you personally, in public, in front of everybody, for doing such a great job on putting this show together because I don't know about you guys, but I'm overwhelmed right now. I'm got family people that need a lot of caregiving and it's taking up a lot of time. And Luann, it's taken so much pressure off me and I am so appreciative of that. Really, really, really.
And you're doing a great job. Absolutely great job.
All right, so I have decided to make it easy to find me because I have so many things we do, and it's called thedcrenterprises.com. And if you go there, you can find the private investigations, the intuitive entertainment, the coaching, the handwriting therapy, all there on one site with the links. So isn't that great?
Thank you.
All right, guys, we'll see y'all next week, and thank y'all so much.
Thanks a bunch, everybody.
Thank y'all.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye. Nice
Bye-bye.
meeting you.